The silence had become routine. 6 months of nothing but cosmic background radiation, stellar wind fluctuations, and the occasional pulsar hiccup. Luna Station's deep space communication array stretched its delicate tendrils across the void, listening constantly to frequencies that most species couldn't even perceive. Dr. Mara Delgado had grown accustomed to the silence, finding a peculiar comfort in it as she monitored her instruments during the graveyard shift. Humanity had been alone for so long. Not truly alone. There were hundreds of civilizations spread across the galactic arm, but isolated by choice and reputation. The Deathworlders, they called us. The species that evolved on a planet so hostile that our very physiology had become a weapon, where most sentient life developed on gentle worlds with predictable weather and minimal predation. Humans had clawed their way to dominance on a planet actively trying to kill them. It made them different. It made them feared. The Terran Council had established a strict non-interference policy centuries ago. Let them fear us from a distance, was the prevailing wisdom. Better that than invite them close enough to fear us up close. So Luna Station listened, but rarely responded. The communication array was more about strategic awareness than diplomatic outreach. Mara sipped her synthetic coffee, scrolling through the night's data logs. Nothing unusual. Routine chatter between Arcturian trading vessels. A celebratory broadcast from the Palexian homeworld, marking some religious festival. The usual diplomatic posturing from the Galactic Council that deliberately excluded Earth from its membership. She was about to initiate the shift handover protocol when every alarm in the station erupted simultaneously. 11:11 station time. The screens blazed with sudden activity as 12 different frequencies lit up with the same urgent signal. Mara's hands flew across the haptic interface, isolating and enhancing the transmission. It originated from the Solaran system, a moderate-sized civilization about 30 light-years from Sol. The message repeated in multiple languages, including a somewhat archaic version of Standard English. Our world is being harvested. The Ravager Collective has broken through our orbital defenses. 2 billion already dead. Atmosphere processors compromised. Please help us. Please help us. Please help us. Mara's finger hesitated only briefly over the emergency protocol button. This wasn't some navigational mishap or diplomatic squabble. This was genocide in progress. She slammed her palm down, sending an immediate alert to Admiral Soren Vale, Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. 3 minutes later, the Admiral's stern face filled her main screen. His silver-gray hair was uncombed, suggesting she'd woken him, but his eyes were alert and focused. "Explain," he said without preamble. Mara forwarded the transmission data. First genuine alien distress call in 276 years. Sir, the Solarans are under attack by an entity calling itself the Ravager Collective. Planetary bombardment. Civilian casualties in the billions. They're broadcasting on 12 different frequency bands simultaneously. Vale's expression remained impassive, but Mara noted the tightening around his eyes. Verification? Signal characteristics match known Solaran communication protocols. Quantum authentication signatures are consistent with their diplomatic registry. This is real. Admiral. Vale was silent for 16 seconds. Mara counted them. Finally, he spoke in a lower voice. The Council will debate non-interference. They always do. But this. He seemed to reach a decision. Implement First Contact Protocol Alpha 3. I'm convening an emergency session. Keep that channel open. Dr. Delgado, record everything. The screen went dark before she could respond. Mara turned back to her instruments, fingers trembling slightly as she fine-tuned the reception. The signal continued, more desperate now. Behind the translated words, she could hear the sound of explosions. The Solarans were dying while humans decided whether they deserved to live. The Terran Council chamber buzzed with urgent conversation. 36 of Earth's most powerful political and military leaders, gathered in emergency session for the first time in decades. The massive holographic display at the center of the room showed the Siluran system, a yellow-white star with 7 planets, the third of which glowed an ominous red to indicate distress. Admiral Vale stood at the podium, his dress uniform immaculate, his posture rigid. "The facts are simple," he stated, cutting through the chatter. "A civilization of approximately 8 billion sentient beings is being systematically exterminated. They have explicitly requested our intervention. We have the military capability to respond. The only question is whether we will." Counselor Ibrahim shook his head. "Our non-interference doctrine has served us well for centuries. We risk exposing Earth to retribution if we engage." "With respect, Counselor," Vale countered, "the doctrine was established to prevent cultural contamination of developing civilizations, not to justify standing idle during genocide." "The Solarans are not our responsibility," argued Counselor Takahashi. "There are hundreds of civilizations closer to them than we are, most of which lack meaningful military capacity," Vale responded. "The Solarans chose to contact us specifically because they know our capabilities. They're asking for the Deathworlders precisely because they need us." The debate raged for hours. Vale remained at the podium, patiently addressing each concern, each objection. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Council President Aliyev called for a vote. 22-14 in favor of intervention. Vale didn't wait for the formal conclusion of the session. He activated his neural link to Fleet Command before the President could even adjourn the meeting. "Operation Iron Dawn is a go. Mobilize all available combat vessels. I want the expeditionary force at launch readiness in 12 hours. Colonel Tess Bryant moved through the ranks of her Marines with predatory grace. Each soldier stood at perfect attention in the cavernous deployment bay of the TDF Indomitable, Earth's largest troop carrier. 8,000 of humanity's finest warriors, each in powered assault armor that made them look more machine than human. "This isn't a drill," she announced, her voice carrying without need for amplification. "This isn't a simulation. In 24 hours, we will be the first human military force to engage an alien enemy in direct combat in over 3 centuries." She paused, noting the subtle shifts in posture, excitement, apprehension, determination. "I've reviewed the intelligence briefings. The enemy calls itself the Ravager Collective. They're harvesting the Solaran world for resources, including its people. They've done this before to at least 6 other civilizations. They're experienced. They're ruthless." Bryant walked slowly between the formations, making eye contact with as many soldiers as possible. "But they've never fought Deathworlders before." A ripple of pride moved through the assembled troops. "We evolved on a planet with twice the average gravity of most sentient species. Our muscles are denser, our reflexes faster, our bones stronger. We can endure physical trauma that would kill most aliens instantly. In our powered armor, each of you is equivalent to a small tank." She stopped at the center of the formation. "But our greatest advantage isn't physical, it's psychological. The Ravagers expect their victims to flee, to surrender, to negotiate. They don't expect their prey to charge straight at them." Bryant allowed herself a small, predatory smile. "We're going to hit them harder and faster than they can imagine. Not just because we can, but because there are 2 billion innocent civilians counting on us. The Solarans are a peaceful species. Scientists, artists, philosophers. They can't defend themselves. We can, and we will." She raised her voice for the final declaration. "Prepare for drop deployment. We launch in 12 hours. Humanity is watching. History is watching. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you awaken the Deathworlders." As her troops dispersed to their final preparations, Bryant received a priority communication request from intelligence. Lieutenant Dax Renner's youthful face appeared in her visual field. "Colonel, we've completed the initial analysis of Siluran biology and Ravager tactical patterns," he reported. "I'm forwarding the full briefing now. but you should know the highlights immediately. Bryant nodded. Go ahead, Lieutenant. The Silurians evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal environmental hazards. Their physiology is fragile by our standards. Approximately 60% of Earth gravity is their comfort threshold. Their civilization developed without significant warfare. Their weapons technology is limited to mining explosives and police-grade restraint devices. And the Ravagers? Renner's expression darkened. Comprehensive harvesters. They strip planets of all valuable resources, minerals, water, organics. They've developed specialized extraction technologies for different target worlds. On Solara, they're using atmospheric processors to extract noble gases, while simultaneously deploying ground forces to round up the population. For what purpose? Slave labor, primarily. The Solarans have exceptional visual acuity and fine motor control, useful for delicate technical work. Some are also taken for medical experimentation. Bryant controlled her expression, but anger flared hot in her chest. Weaknesses? Vulnerabilities? Their exo-armor has poorly protected joint mechanisms. Power distribution nodes are external rather than internal. Unusual design choice that creates targeting opportunities. They rely heavily on drone swarms for perimeter defense, controlled by centralized command nodes. Perfect, Bryant said. We'll target those command nodes first, disable the drones, then move in for close-quarters combat where our physical advantages will be decisive. There's one more thing, Colonel. Renner hesitated. Siluran cultural archives indicate they've studied humanity extensively. They specifically requested our help because they've analyzed our combat capabilities. They believe we're their only hope. Bryant absorbed this information silently. Then, Lieutenant, make sure our troops understand. We're not just fighting for strangers today. We're fighting for a people who recognized our worth when the rest of the galaxy only saw our danger. Captain Li Wei stood on the bridge of the TDF Resolute, flagship of the Terran Defense Fleet. Through the massive viewports, he could see hundreds of warships moving into formation. Destroyers, cruisers, corvettes, and the massive dreadnoughts that formed the backbone of humanity's military might. It was the largest fleet mobilization in centuries. All vessels report ready, Captain, his executive officer announced. Hyperspace calculations complete and synchronized across the fleet. Wei nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. 600 ships carrying over 40,000 personnel, jumping simultaneously into what would likely be humanity's first interstellar war since the unification era. Admiral on deck, someone called out. Wei turned to see Admiral Vale striding onto the bridge, accompanied by Dr. Mara Delgado. The Admiral had personally requested the communications specialist join the mission, given her familiarity with the initial distress signal. Status report, Captain, Vale ordered, taking position at the command station. Fleet is in jump formation. Admiral, all systems green. Combat readiness at 100%. Vale surveyed the tactical display, then addressed the bridge crew. What we do today will define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations, for centuries. We've been feared and isolated because of our potential for violence. Today, we demonstrate that the same strength that makes us dangerous can make us the most effective protectors in known space. He turned to Mara. Dr. Delgado, establish a fleet-wide communication channel. When she nodded her readiness, Vale spoke again, his voice now broadcasting to every ship in the Armada. This is Admiral Soren Vale. In 2 minutes, we will execute a coordinated hyperspace jump to the Siluran system. Intelligence indicates we will be outnumbered approximately 7-1. The enemy has never encountered human military forces and will be unprepared for our combat doctrine. He paused, allowing his words to resonate. Our mission objectives are clear. Neutralize the Ravager fleet, destroy their atmospheric processors, and secure the safety of surviving Solaran civilians. This is not a war of conquest or retribution. It is a humanitarian intervention against genocide. The bridge was utterly silent as he continued. Every person serving in this fleet volunteered for duty. You chose to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Today, you honor that choice. Today, the galaxy learns that humanity's strength is not something to be feared, but something to be grateful for when the darkness comes. Vale nodded to Captain Wei. Execute jump sequence. Wei gave the command, and the massive fleet disappeared into the swirling blue-white vortices of hyperspace. The journey would take 14 hours, an eternity for the Solarans fighting for survival. But a testament to human technological prowess nonetheless. Most species required days or weeks to traverse similar distances. Mara had established a dedicated communication station on the Resolute's bridge, continuously monitoring transmissions from the Silaran system. 6 hours into their journey, she detected something unexpected, faint signal bursts using frequencies that differed from the original distress call. "Admiral," she called out, "I'm picking up encrypted communications from the surface of Solara. They're using a different protocol than their standard channels." Vale joined her at the station. "Can you decrypt it?" "Working on it now." Her fingers danced across the interface. "It appears to be a resistance network. Underground communications between—" "Wait." Her eyes widened. "Sir, there are far more survivors than we initially believed. At least 2 billion Solarans have taken refuge in subterranean shelter complexes. They're coordinating a resistance movement." Vale's expression remained controlled, but there was a new light in his eyes. "This changes our tactical approach. Lieutenant Renner," he called to the intelligence officer. "Coordinate with Dr. Delgado. I want a complete map of these underground complexes and resistance strongholds." Colonel Bryant. He activated a direct link to the Marine commander. "Prepare your forces for a groundside support mission. We'll need to secure those shelters and evacuate civilians." As the fleet continued its hyperspace journey, news of the mobilization leaked to the civilian population on Earth. The Terran Council had intended to inform the public only after the operation was complete. But in an age of quantum communication, secrets rarely remain secret for long. Public reaction was sharply divided. In major cities, protests erupted demanding an immediate recall of the fleet. "Not our war" and "peace through neutrality" signs filled the streets outside government buildings. Simultaneously, patriotic rallies formed in support of the mission, with crowds chanting, "Defend the innocent," and "Humanity stands tall." The political backlash threatened to undermine the mission even as it was underway. Several council members who had voted in favor of intervention now publicly expressed concerns about the operation's scope. President Aliyev held an emergency press conference, standing firm behind the decision. "For too long, we have allowed fear of our own strength to keep us isolated," he declared to billions of viewers. "We have hidden behind our reputation as dangerous Deathworlders, rather than demonstrating our capacity for compassion. Today, we show the galaxy that the same evolutionary pressures that made us formidable warriors also instilled in us an unshakable sense of justice." Aboard the Resolute, Vale received hourly updates on the political situation, but remained focused on the mission. "Politicians will debate," he told his officers. "We will act." 12 hours into the journey, the fleet's vanguard corvettes emerged from hyperspace at the outer edge of the Silaran system. These small, agile ships were tasked with reconnaissance and initial engagement of enemy picket forces. Commander Alexis Rhodes, leading the corvette squadron, immediately detected Ravager scout ships patrolling the system's periphery. "Contact," she reported to the fleet. 8 enemy vessels, configuration unknown. They've detected us and are moving to intercept." Vale's orders came through clearly. "Engage at your discretion, Commander. This is our opportunity to test their capabilities before the main fleet arrives." Rhodes didn't hesitate. "All corvettes, attack pattern Delta, weapons free." The 12 human ships accelerated toward the approaching Ravagers, executing a complex 3-dimensional maneuver that split their formation into 4 attack groups. The enemy responded with a standard pursuit pattern, clearly unprepared for the corvette's exceptional maneuverability. The first exchange of fire proved revealing. Ravager energy weapons were powerful, but slow to recharge, while human Gauss cannons delivered a continuous barrage of hypervelocity projectiles. The corvettes targeted the weak points Lieutenant Renner had identified: external power nodes and joint mechanisms in the alien vessel's armor. Within minutes, 3 Ravager ships had been disabled, and 2 destroyed outright. The remaining 3 broke off their attack and retreated deeper into the system, undoubtedly to warn their main fleet. Rhodes reported back to Admiral Vale. "First engagement successful, sir. Our intel on their vulnerabilities proved accurate. Their ships are heavily armored but poorly designed for combat against agile opponents. They rely on overwhelming firepower, rather than tactical flexibility." "Casualties?" Vale inquired. 2 corvettes damaged. No fatalities. Shields held against their energy weapons, though barely. A direct hit from their main cannons would likely breach our defenses. Vale absorbed this information. "Well done, Commander. Maintain position and prepare to support the main fleet's arrival. We'll be joining you in 2 hours." As the final preparations for the main assault were completed, Mara continued monitoring the Resistance communications from Solara's surface. The transmissions grew increasingly desperate as Ravager ground forces began systematic sweeps of cities, searching for hidden civilians. "They're using atmospheric sensors to detect life signs," Mara reported. "The underground shelters have air filtration systems, but they're struggling to mask thermal signatures from so many people in confined spaces." Lieutenant Renner joined her analysis. "The Ravagers will locate the largest shelters within hours at their current search rate. We need to arrive before they do." Vale nodded grimly. "Captain Wei, can we accelerate our approach?" Wei consulted with his navigation officer. "We can reduce emergence time by approximately 30 minutes by adjusting our hyperspace vectors, but it increases the risk of fleet dispersion on arrival." "Do it," Vale ordered. "I want all combat vessels to prioritize destruction of Ravager ground transports upon emergence. If we can't stop their search teams from finding the shelters, we need to ensure they can't reach them." The order was transmitted throughout the fleet, and the massive armada adjusted its course through the swirling currents of hyperspace, driving toward a confrontation that would reshape galactic politics forever. The TDF Resolute tore through the fabric of normal space, emerging from hyperspace in a blaze of Cherenkov radiation. Behind it came the full might of humanity's fleet: dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and troop carriers, appearing in perfect formation despite the accelerated approach. The scene that greeted them was worse than their intelligence had predicted. The once beautiful world of Solara was partially obscured by massive harvester stations, orbital factories the size of small moons, connected to the planet's surface by shimmering energy conduits. The planet's atmosphere had taken on a sickly yellow hue, evidence of the chemical processes extracting noble gases. And surrounding it all was the Ravager fleet, over 4,000 vessels of varying sizes, arranged in defensive formations around their harvesting operation. For a moment, there was silence across all communication channels, as if both sides were absorbing the reality of the confrontation. Then Admiral Vale's voice, calm and resolute, issued the command that would echo through history. "All vessels, engage according to Battle Plan Alpha. Dreadnoughts target harvester stations. Cruisers and destroyers, neutralize their defensive line. Frigates, establish perimeter control. Troop carriers, proceed to designated deployment coordinates. The Solarans have held out this long. Let's make sure they didn't wait in vain." The human fleet accelerated toward its targets with perfect coordination. The massive dreadnoughts moved directly toward the harvester stations, their main guns charging. Smaller, faster vessels executed complex maneuvers to disrupt enemy formations before they could organize an effective response. The Ravagers, clearly stunned by the sudden appearance of an unknown military force, took precious minutes to redirect their fleet. By the time they began to respond coherently, the first human salvos had already struck their targets. Dreadnought-class energy beams lanced through space, striking the nearest harvester station. The massive structure's shields flared brilliant blue, then collapsed under the sustained assault. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface as critical systems failed. Simultaneously, human destroyers engaged the front line of the Ravager fleet. Unlike the corvette's earlier skirmish, this was full-scale space warfare, thousands of vessels exchanging fire across the void, maneuvering for tactical advantage in 3 dimensions. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Vale stood calmly amidst the controlled chaos, issuing orders and responding to rapidly changing battle conditions. Captain Wei directed the flagship's weapon systems with surgical precision, targeting Ravager command vessels to disrupt their communication network. "Admiral," Mara called out, "I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations from the planet's surface. The atmospheric processors are increasing extraction rate. They're trying to accelerate their harvesting before we can stop them." Vale turned to his tactical display. "Designate the planetary conduits as priority targets. Redirect Destroyer Group 3 to provide covering fire for our troop carriers." As he spoke, the first wave of marine deployment pods launched from the Indomitable, streaking toward Solera's surface like meteors. Each pod contained a squad of power-armored Marines, led by Colonel Bryant herself in the lead vessel. "Deploying in 30 seconds, Bryant's voice came through the command channel. Encountering minimal aerial resistance. They didn't expect a ground assault. Vale nodded in satisfaction. The Ravagers are harvesters, not warriors. They're accustomed to overwhelming defenseless worlds, not facing an organized military response. Even as he spoke, the battle in orbit intensified. The Ravagers, recovering from their initial shock, began to coordinate their attacks more effectively. 3 human destroyers disappeared in blinding explosions as concentrated energy beams overwhelmed their shields. "Cruiser Division, execute Maneuver Epsilon," Vale ordered. "Draw their fire away from the destroyers. Captain Wei, bring us alongside that command carrier. I want it disabled, not destroyed. Their command databanks will be valuable." The massive Resolute accelerated toward the largest Ravager vessel, its point defense systems intercepting incoming fire, while its main batteries targeted the enemy ship's propulsion systems. The 2 giants of space engaged in a deadly dance, exchanging devastating blows at close range. Meanwhile, on Solera's surface, the first Marine pods crashed through the atmosphere and deployed their occupants. Colonel Bryant hit the ground running, her powered armor absorbing the impact with ease. Around her, hundreds of Marines deployed in perfect formation, securing a landing zone for the larger troop transports that would follow. "Resistance minimal," she reported, as her forces encountered scattered Ravager ground units. "They're using mechanized drones for most of their harvesting operations. Minimal organic troops." The Marines moved rapidly toward the nearest underground shelter complex, where sensors indicated over 100,000 Solarans had taken refuge. Ravager harvester teams had already begun cutting through the reinforced doors using industrial-grade plasma torches. Bryant didn't hesitate. "Alpha and Bravo squads, with me. The rest of you secure the perimeter." She led 24 Marines in a direct assault on the Ravager position. The aliens, encased in bulky exosuits designed for industrial operations rather than combat, turned in surprise as the humans charged. The first volley from the Marines' Gauss rifles tore through the Ravager's armor at the vulnerable joint sections Renner had identified. The aliens responded with industrial cutting tools, repurposed as weapons, but they were no match for humans trained specifically for warfare and equipped with dedicated combat technology. Within minutes, the Ravager team had been neutralized, and Bryant's Marines secured the shelter entrance. When they cut through the damaged door, they found themselves facing thousands of terrified Solarans, tall, willowy beings with large, luminous eyes and pale blue skin. "We're from Earth," Bryant announced, her armor's external speakers translating her words into the Siluran language. "We received your distress call, and we're here to help." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Sounds of relief and gratitude filled the chamber as the Solarans realized they were being rescued, not harvested. One of them, wearing elaborate garments that suggested authority, approached Bryant cautiously. "I am Director Nellis, Civil Defense Coordinator. You are the Deathworlders. You actually came to our aid?" Bryant nodded. "Humanity answers those who ask for help. We have a fleet in orbit engaging the Ravager forces. My Marines are securing all identified shelter complexes. We'll evacuate your people to safe locations." As she spoke, reports flooded in from other Marine squads. Similar scenes were playing out across the planet as human forces secured shelter after shelter, protecting the surviving Silarans from the increasingly desperate Ravager ground teams. In orbit, the battle had reached its crescendo. Two of the massive harvester stations had been completely destroyed, their wreckage forming an expanding debris field around the planet. A third was disabled, its energy conduits to the surface severed. The Ravager fleet, now in disarray, had lost nearly a third of its vessels. "Admiral," Mara called out suddenly, "I've decrypted their command channel. The Ravagers are using a quantum frequency modulation we hadn't detected before." She routed the translated communications to the main tactical display. The Ravager commanders were panicking. "Unknown hostiles deploy ground forces with impossible strength. Command carrier dominant void disabled. Weapons offline. Request immediate reinforcement from Sector Fleet." Denied. Sector Fleet engaged with Kraul Uprising. These attackers matched no known species profile. Individual combat units exhibiting strength beyond biological parameters. Harvest operation compromised. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Supreme Harvester denies withdrawal request. Continue extraction protocols. Unable to comply. Ground teams reporting 80% casualties. Shelter defense failing. Vale's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "They're breaking. Continue the assault. No mercy for their military assets. But I want prisoners from their command structure." The battle continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Ravager fleet, denied reinforcements and facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before, gradually disintegrated. Some vessels attempted to flee into hyperspace, only to be intercepted by human frigates positioned specifically for this purpose. Others fought to the last, their captains apparently more afraid of returning to their superiors in defeat than dying in battle. When the final Ravager command carrier surrendered, Admiral Vale ordered an immediate cessation of hostilities against non-combatant vessels. "We're not exterminators," he reminded his commanders. "We're here to stop a genocide, not commit one." The human casualties were significant but far less than feared. 3 destroyers lost with all hands, 2 cruisers severely damaged, and approximately 500 personnel killed across the fleet. Ground casualties among the Marines were minimal, 12 dead and 47 wounded, primarily from encounters with Ravager heavy machinery rather than direct combat. The Ravagers had lost over 1,200 ships, with the remainder captured or fled. Their harvesting operation was completely destroyed, and their ground forces had been systematically eliminated or captured. As the fighting concluded, Colonel Bryant established a forward command post in what had been Solara's capital city. The elegant crystal spires of Solaran architecture stood in sharp contrast to the utilitarian human military equipment now deployed throughout the metropolitan area. A delegation of Siluran leaders, emerging from the underground shelters, approached the human position with a mixture of awe and gratitude. At their head walked a distinguished figure that Bryant recognized from intelligence briefings as Dr. Elin Sarath, the world's leading xenobiologist and one of the architects of the shelter network that had saved billions of lives. "Colonel Bryant," Sarath said, her translator, rendering her musical language into crisp English. I lack adequate words to express what your arrival means to my people. When we sent our distress call, many doubted that the legendary Deathworlders would respond to the pleas of a species so different from their own. Bryant removed her helmet, allowing the Solurans to see her face. Dr. Sarath, humanity may have evolved on a harsh world, but that same environment taught us the value of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Your people's trust in us will not be forgotten. Sarath gestured to the devastation around them. Half our world lies in ruins, billions dead. Yet because of you, billions more will live to rebuild. The galaxy has misunderstood your species for too long. Today, the Deathworlders have revealed themselves to be not monsters, but saviors. Similar scenes played out across the planet as Siluran survivors emerged from hiding to find human forces standing guard over their safety. Medical teams from the fleet deployed to treat the injured, while Engineering Corps began the process of neutralizing the remaining Ravager technology that threatened the planet's ecosystem. Aboard the Resolute, Admiral Vale received the preliminary after-action reports with quiet satisfaction. "Begin recovery operations," he ordered. "I want all salvageable Ravager technology secured for analysis. Their command databanks are priority 1. We need to understand the full extent of their harvesting operations throughout the galaxy." Mara, who had been analyzing the captured communications data, looked up from her station. "Admiral, I've discovered something significant. The Ravagers have conducted similar operations on at least 23 worlds in the past century. Most were pre-spaceflight civilizations, unable to call for help." Vale's expression darkened. "Compile all evidence into a formal report. When we return to Earth, I intend to present it to the Galactic Council myself. They've ignored these atrocities because the victims were too primitive to have diplomatic standing. That ends now." In the days that followed, a monumental recovery effort began. Human ships established a defensive perimeter around the Siluran system, while engineering teams worked to stabilize the damaged atmosphere and neutralize the toxic compounds introduced by the Ravager processors. Colonel Bryant's Marines transitioned from combat operations to humanitarian assistance, helping relocate Solarans from overcrowded shelters to habitable surface regions. The cultural exchange that resulted was unprecedented. Humans and Solarans working side by side, learning about each other's societies in the most challenging possible circumstances. 2 weeks after the battle, Admiral Vale stood before a joint assembly of the Terran Council and Siluran leadership in a temporary command center established in orbit. The formal proceedings were being broadcast to both worlds and, at Vale's insistence, to the Galactic Council chambers that had long excluded Earth from its deliberations. "Today, we formalize what began with a distress call and a decision to answer it," Vale announced. "The Terran-Solaran Defense Pact establishes a mutual protection agreement between our worlds. But more importantly, it serves as the foundation for what we are calling the Alliance of the Shielded, an open invitation to any peaceful civilization threatened by aggression to join our collective security arrangement." Dr. Sarath, representing the Solaran consensus, stepped forward. "For too long, the galaxy has been divided between predator and prey species. The strong devour the weak, while those with the power to intervene hide behind neutrality. Today, we declare that there is a third path, the path of the Protector." She turned to face the human delegation directly. "Humanity's evolution on a dangerous world did not make you monsters. It made you uniquely qualified to stand against the true monsters that threaten peaceful civilizations. What others feared as the Deathworlders' curse, we now recognize as the galaxy's greatest blessing." The treaty was signed to thunderous applause from both human and Solaran observers. In the Galactic Council chambers, the broadcast caused an uproar as dozens of species, particularly those from smaller, vulnerable worlds, demanded immediate diplomatic recognition of the new alliance. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Mara found herself standing alone on an observation deck, watching the slow rotation of Solara below. Despite the visible scars of the Ravager attack, there was beauty in the planet's blue-green oceans and crystalline cities. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Admiral Vale's voice came from behind her. Mara turned, surprised to find the fleet commander seeking her out. "Yes, sir. I was just thinking about how different things would be if we hadn't heard their call, or if we'd chosen not to answer it." Vale moved to stand beside her at the viewport. Throughout human history, the most important moral choices have often been the simplest. Not easy, but simple. Do we act, or do we stand aside? Do we protect those who cannot protect themselves? Or do we hide behind politics and self-interest? He gestured toward the planet below. For centuries, we've been feared as the dangerous species that evolved on a death trap of a world. We accepted that isolation because it was easier than explaining ourselves. Easier than proving we were more than our reputation. "And now," Mara asked, "now we've shown the galaxy what Deathworlders truly are. Not mindless killers, but warriors with purpose. Not dangers to be contained, but shields to be deployed." Vale's normally stern expression softened slightly. "You were the first to hear their call, Dr. Delgado. In many ways, this new chapter of human history began with you." Mara shook her head modestly. "I just did my job, Admiral. Anyone would have responded to that distress signal. Perhaps, but not everyone would have fought so hard to ensure we answered it." He turned back to the viewport. "The Alliance already has 17 applications for membership from worlds that have suffered Ravager incursions. The Galactic Council is in chaos as species that once feared us now seek our protection." "Do you think it will last?" Mara asked. "This new role for humanity?" Vale considered the question thoughtfully. "I believe we've finally found our place in the galactic community. Not as isolationists hiding our strength. Not as conquerors imposing our will. But as guardians, using the very traits that made us feared to now make us essential." Below them, Solaran reconstruction ships moved through the orbital debris field, salvaging materials to rebuild what had been destroyed. Human engineering vessels worked alongside them, introducing technologies that would help protect the world from future attacks. "The galaxy called us Deathworlders," Vale said quietly, "because they didn't understand that surviving on a world that tries to kill you doesn't make you a monster. It makes you resilient. It makes you appreciate peace all the more because you know the cost of conflict." Mara smiled, watching as a joint human-Solaran team deployed a new defensive satellite. "I think I prefer our new title anyway." "Oh, and what's that?" "The Solarans have already started using it in their communications," Mara replied. "They're calling us the Shield Bearers." Vale nodded approvingly. "Shield Bearers. I like that. It's a good name for a species finally coming to terms with its strength." He straightened his uniform and turned to leave. "Get some rest, Dr. Delgado. Tomorrow we begin the journey home and the work of building this alliance properly." As Vale departed, Mara remained at the viewport, watching the slow dance of ships around the wounded planet. The Silurans had called out into the darkness, not knowing if anyone would answer. Humanity had responded not with fear or hesitation, but with the full force of a species that understood what it meant to fight for survival. The Deathworlders had found their purpose at last, not as the galaxy's nightmare, but as its most dedicated protectors. And for Mara Delgado, who had first heard the desperate plea from a dying world, that transformation meant everything.